December 1944. In the frozen, silent forests of the Ardennes, American soldiers, thinking the war was nearly over, huddled against the bitter cold. They were in a honeymoon sector, a quiet place to rest. But at 5:30 in the morning on December 16th, hell erupted. Over 1,600 German artillery guns opened fire, shattering the dawn. Through the mist and snow, Tiger tanks and waves of infantry smashed into the thin American lines. This was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's final, desperate gamble to win World War II. It would become the single bloodiest battle in American history. But the most haunting question isn't about the ferocity of the attack. It's this: how did the most powerful intelligence network in the world, the Allied Command, completely miss it? They had everything: decrypted German codes, prisoner confessions, aerial photos, even a direct warning from a Japanese diplomat in Berlin. Yet, US generals, basking in the glory of Normandy and the liberation of Paris, saw nothing. They misread a mountain of evidence that screamed of impending doom. This is the story of a colossal intelligence failure, a story of how overconfidence and human bias nearly lost the war, costing tens of thousands of lives and leaving a lesson that echoes to this day. To understand this catastrophic blind spot, we have to go back to the optimistic autumn of 1944. After the D-Day landings in June, Allied forces had spectacularly broken out of Normandy and were racing across France. Paris was free by August, and the German army, the Wehrmacht, seemed to be on the verge of total collapse. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, and his top generals like Omar Bradley, were convinced the war would be over by Christmas. Their strategy was all about offense, a broad front push straight into Germany. The Ardennes forest, a rugged, hilly, and densely wooded region in Belgium and Luxembourg, seemed like the last place the Germans would attack. It was considered terrible tank country. So, the Allies used it as a rest area. The front line there was held by just 4 American divisions, 2 of them exhausted from the brutal fighting in the Hurtgen forest, and 2 of them brand new, green units who had never seen combat. General Bradley himself called it a quiet front. But beneath that quiet, Hitler was secretly amassing a massive force for an operation he codenamed Watch on the Rhine. His goal was audacious: punch through the weak American line, race to the coast to capture the vital port of Antwerp, split the Allied armies in two, and force a negotiated peace. The clues were everywhere, if only someone had been willing to see them. The first and most critical source was Ultra, the top-secret Allied project at Bletchley Park that had cracked Germany's supposedly unbreakable Enigma code. In November and early December, Ultra intercepts picked up a storm of activity. Panzer divisions were being pulled from the Eastern Front and moved west. New communications networks for armored units were suddenly lighting up. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was being massively reinforced with fighters. But Allied interpreters dismissed it all. They saw the signs, but concluded it was purely defensive. They believed the Germans were just preparing to counter the next Allied attack, not launch their own. Then there was the human intelligence. Captured German soldiers started talking. On December 4th, a captured corporal confessed that a huge offensive was planned for before Christmas. Others confirmed it, mentioning tank concentrations and special bridging equipment being moved to the rivers. Aerial reconnaissance, despite the terrible winter weather, managed to snap photos of new gun emplacements and columns of vehicles disguised with Allied markings to sow confusion. One teletype from the 9th Air Force explicitly warned of a massive Luftwaffe buildup. And perhaps the most stunning piece of evidence came from the other side of the world. The Allies had also broken the Japanese diplomatic code, an operation codenamed Magic. They were reading messages from Japan's ambassador in Berlin, Baron Oshima, who was relaying his conversations with Hitler directly to Tokyo. In one of these messages, Hitler explicitly told him he was planning a massive counteroffensive in the West. This clear, unambiguous warning was circulated to the highest levels of Allied command. But somehow, in the pre-Christmas optimism and the rush of planning their own offensives, it was ignored. It was lost in the noise. So who was responsible for this failure of interpretation? The intelligence chiefs on the ground, like Brigadier General Edwin Sibert, did raise flags. His reports noted that entire German divisions seemed to have vanished from the map, and new units were appearing in the Eifel region, right across from the Ardennes. Colonel Oskar Koch, the brilliant intelligence officer for General George S. Patton's Third Army, was even more specific. He correctly predicted a major German strike aimed directly at the thinly held 8-Corps sector. But the problem wasn't a lack of data, it was a crisis of imagination at the top. The senior leadership was locked into a single mindset. Victory was imminent. They had become over-reliant on ultra-intelligence. When the Germans, in preparation for their attack, enforced strict radio silence and switched to landline telephones, the flow of ultra-intercepts dried up. Instead of seeing this silence as a sign of stealth and preparation, Allied leaders interpreted it as proof the Germans were weak and inactive. They saw what they wanted to see. This was fueled by a dangerous cocktail of institutional arrogance and psychological bias. After months of non-stop victory, from Normandy to Paris, overconfidence had infected the entire command structure. General Bradley reportedly scoffed at the warnings, saying of the Germans, "Let them come." Eisenhower himself later admitted to a shocking deficiency in how intelligence was handled. No one wanted to be the one to deliver bad news, to be the pessimist who suggested pumping the brakes when victory seemed so close. The culture rewarded aggressive, offensive thinking, and treated defensive vigilance as a sign of weakness. Historians still debate the exact cause. Some point to a flawed US Army structure that treated intelligence as a secondary concern, an afterthought to operations. Others point directly at command arrogance, that Eisenhower and Bradley were so focused on their own grand plans that they simply couldn't conceive of the enemy doing the same. But everyone agrees on one thing. While the Germans' operational security was impressive, the real culprit was Allied hubris. They had won so many battles that they believed they couldn't possibly be surprised. On December 16th, that illusion was shattered. Over 400,000 German soldiers and more than 1,000 tanks slammed into the American lines. The Green 106th Infantry Division was surrounded and effectively destroyed in a matter of days, resulting in the largest mass surrender of US troops in the European theater. The German advance created a massive bulge in the Allied front, 60 miles deep at its peak. Chaos and terror reigned. Near the town of Malmedy, SS troops murdered 84 unarmed American prisoners of war in a frozen field, an atrocity that hardened American resolve. The cost was immense. The US suffered over 89,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed. Thousands more suffered from severe frostbite in one of the coldest winters on record. The Germans lost over 100,000 men and, crucially, their last reserves of tanks and fuel. The battle delayed the final Allied push into Germany by 6 weeks. This delay had major geopolitical consequences, allowing the Soviet Red Army to push deeper into Eastern Europe, redrawing the map and setting the stage for the Cold War. But in the midst of this disaster, something incredible happened. American soldiers, cut off and outnumbered, refused to break. Small units fought with ferocious adaptability. At places like Elsenborn Ridge, a handful of divisions held the northern shoulder of the Bulge, stopping the main German armored thrust cold. And at the vital crossroads town of Bastogne, the surrounded 101st Airborne Division held on against impossible odds. When the German commander demanded their surrender, the American commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, gave his now legendary one-word reply: nuts. That defiance became the symbol of American grit. General Patton, in a stunning feat of logistics, turned his entire 3rd Army 90 degrees and marched them north through the snow to relieve Bastogne. By the end of January 1945, the Bulge had been erased. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge became a mirror, reflecting the dangerous frailties of leadership. The US generals misread the evidence not because it wasn't there, but because their own success had blinded them. They saw a defeated enemy because that's what they expected to see. As Eisenhower himself would later write with stark honesty, we were completely, utterly fooled. The intelligence failure spurred massive reforms in the US military, leading to the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency and a new emphasis on all-source intelligence analysis. The lesson of the Bulge is timeless. It's a stark reminder that data is useless without correct interpretation, and that even the most powerful nations can be brought to the brink by overconfidence. It teaches us to challenge our own assumptions, to listen to dissenting voices, and to never, ever underestimate an opponent. In a world full of complex threats, humility isn't a weakness. It's the ultimate strategic advantage. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more deep dives into history. We'll see you in the next one.